Awesome. I'm really, really happy to be here. I'm Dido Balla, DIDL, and I work with MindUP. And before I start anything, I love to take the kind of the temperature in the room, usually virtual room. So you have access to your chat box right now. Write the three words that first come to your mind when you think about how you feel presently. Zero judgment. Just type three words. Okay, let's go. Three words. All right, I'm seeing hopeful, renewed, or peak, or peace, probably. I wrote excited, curious, and hungry. Grateful, heartfelt, and excited, relaxed, happy, grateful, tired, overwhelmed, grateful. Again, no judgment. Send them awake, ready, interested, curious, excited, hopeful, empowered, safe, gentle, grateful, raw, open. I love these. Excited, hopeful, calm, grateful, curious, warm, hungry, and calm. I'm hungry too. Content, engaged, calm, buzzing, grateful, energized, calm, grateful, curious, excited, relaxed, charged, excited, present, happy, grateful. Uh, Need to pee. Yeah, go do that. Um, so I love to start with these because again, there's zero judgment. It's just whatever comes to your mind, throw it. And a space like this one is one where you know for sure you can trust that the people next to you really are present and are non-judgmental because they're all mindful. So again, I'm Dido. I want this to be as interactive as possible, both in a way of the chat room and also in a way of just talking. So feel free to at any point interrupt me. If you want to get my attention and I'm not responding, just call me Dido. I have a question. The only thing you should not do is to call me Dido because I don't know why people insist on doing this. Like everywhere I go, I talk about how there's a white blonde lady from England who sings a song with Eminem. Her name is Dido. She sings, "My tea's gone cold, I wonder why." So you have her, Dido. Then you have me, Dido. Like it's not that hard to distinguish. So if you're tempted to call me Dido today, just don't do it, right? So I'm going to, but for real, interrupt me. I want this to be a conversation. We're gonna have some breakout rooms, um, but also just some exchange. And now it seems like I lost the breakout room thing again. Oh no, it's there. It's just like um, a fancier Zoom or something. All right, I'm gonna share my screen and then let's get started. Desktop. Can you guys all see that slide that has the brain? Yes, thumbs up.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay, cool. So this is Mind Up, and I call this from mindful state to mindful trait because I've always been intrigued with the idea of how do you go from practicing something that you can access on demand every now and then to just being somebody who like is mindful. How do you go from being in a mindful state to having a mindful trait? So that's why I like every theme of what I talk about to be that long-term goal of yes, I want to learn how to do this when I feel this way, when I feel that way, but how can I transform my brain? How can I transform myself? How can I transform my classroom or my school? So this is why it's called from the mindful state to mindful trait. And I am going to be monitoring the chat. So let's see here what somebody is saying. Can we access this up? Yes, you can. I can send that to you. Absolutely, great question. So, mind up, right? So for those who don't know, so this is the Goldie Hawn Foundation. Goldie started this in 2000 after 9/11 is when the idea came to her. She figured, looking at the kids all around the country who were stressed, anxious. I mean, the suicide rate for kids skyrocketed, the dropout rate, and she wanted to do something about this. And she figured, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to gather experts from around the world and bring them together so we can create an evidence-based program that kids can use in schools so they can have a better understanding of their feelings and their emotions and their self-regulation. So from 2001 to 2003, these experts and researchers got together and came up with this program. It was tested at first and then released in 2003. And what I found interesting about all this is that here we are almost 20 years later, and there is a crisis again. It's not 9/11, but it's a pandemic. It's working remotely. It is learning remotely. It is not even knowing when things are going to go back to normal, if they're going to go back to normal. And it is not having a clear understanding of the actual consequences of what this pandemic is going to have on us. So, mind up, mindfulness comes in handy again. So, for me, I started my career as a teacher, a high school teacher. And when I realized that I had a couple of students who were always questioning me, always asking me, but why, but why, but why, or who were always doing the opposite of what I asked them to do. So if I say it's time to stand up, they would sit down. If I say it's time to sit down, they would stand up. And I recognized myself in them. I was like, that was me as a student. What am I going to do about this? And I caught myself almost asking them to calm down. And I remember that when my teachers told me to calm down when I was agitated, according to them, I didn't like it. So I said, I'm going to do some research to find out what happens in the brain of somebody who seems to be agitated and what can you do to actually teach them how to be better. That's how I got into mindfulness myself. And that's how ultimately I get into working with MindUp. So that's me, and that's MindUp. The key thing about MindUp is this next slide right here, and it's our four pillars. Because MindUp is an SEL program, but SEL is one of the four pillars of MindUp. So here are the four pillars. The first one is neuroscience. And the reason why we start with neuroscience, I mean, there's multiple reasons. Start with the fact that when Goldie came up with this 17 years ago, first of all, the first question was, yeah, this is an actress and a dancer who's trying to teach kids. Where's that coming from? So it was important for her to have researchers come up and start with the science of the brain. And two, back then, when you said you were going to teach mindfulness, in fact, I say back then, even like 4 years ago, when I would go do trainings all around the country and say, this is mindfulness, some people would give me a look and say, mindfulness. I would say, yeah. They'd be like, oh, isn't that woo-woo stuff? It's like, well, yeah, it's woo-woo, but it starts from how the brain works. So if anything that I say today sounds a little woo-woo to you, just ask me to connect back to the neuroscience. So the neuroscience is the first pillar for that reason. We want you to know that this is about how the brain works. Chat. Yeah, some people think it's woo-woo. And the reason why I love talking to them is because any of the woo-woo elements that they feel and experience, and it's so easy now in 2021 to connect it to how the brain works. So the more we can explain to them how that good feeling comes from neuroscience, the better. So that's the first pillar of MindUp. And I'm going to spend more time talking about that today. Now, the second pillar of MindUp is mindful awareness. And this is an interesting one because most of us know that based on how the brain works, you are more effective when you are doing one thing at a time. And and yet we tend to fight that, right? Like teachers and educators and parents are notorious for this. I include myself. I'm sure that if I look at your computer right now, you probably have like 13 windows open and your cell phone is not far. You might have a tablet not far from you because we are used to doing so much at the same time. And yet our brains are designed to do one thing at a time and do it well. So we teach kids how to be present in the moment and do one thing at a time to work on that mindfulness. And if if this idea of uh, doing one thing at a time doesn't sound familiar to you, think about this. Have you ever been driving somewhere? You're driving, you're in your car, you have music playing, and you may know where you're going or you may not be sure, but then as you're about to get to the last like left turn, for example, all of a sudden without thinking about it, you suddenly turn down the volume of the music so you can see better. Does that sound familiar to anyone? And if you're doing that, like why would you turn down the volume so you can see better? Because if I ask you, are you able to see and to listen at the same time, you would say, of course, yes. It's like parents who say, no, if the kids are talking in the back, I can't park. Like, kids, let's stop talking, I gotta park. It's like, why? It's because your brain is reminding you that your biology is reminding you that you're actually better at doing one thing at a time. Check, definitely. So that's one that I use to explain to people why doing one thing here and now is important. And for people who believe they are excellent multitaskers, um, I tend to say a few things. One, there are about two jobs, I've done the research, that involve actual multitasking, like you have no other option. One is interpreters, the people who are in the booth when, if you see like a meeting at the UN and all the head of states have headphones because they all speak different languages and somebody's giving a speech in one language you don't understand. The people who are in the booth interpreting live for those diplomats are like they are always multitasking, because think about it, if you make a mistake, you might start a war between two countries. It's really, really important to be on point. But the way their jobs is designed is they never work alone. They always work in pairs, and they have to take breaks like every 15 to 20 minutes. The second job that involves multitasking is air traffic controllers. And so when I talk to people who love to multitask, I tell them, look, you may think you are multitasking, but what you're doing is a serial solo tasking. It's serial solo tasking. It's not really multitasking. So that's what I tell people. That's the second pillar of MindUP. The third pillar of MindUP, I mean, in a group like this one, I don't need to say much about this, but why not? SEL, right? So in addition to the standards that you already know, self-awareness, self-regulation, making good decisions, building relationships, skills, I love to think about SEL as a way to view the human being, the child or the adult holistically. And when I talk to teachers, the way I explain is like this. If you look at your student as a whole, holistic human being, then you realize that they have an experience before they get into your classroom and after they leave your classroom. And those experiences actually directly impact who they are when they are in your class. So you can't just say, okay, I'm teaching math and we're learning equations today, so let's do that. It's like, no. If on the way to school, the kid experienced something stressful, their brain may be triggered in a way where they aren't ready to do math when they get to your class. Or let's talk about Zoom. Maybe just turning on Zoom and seeing their own face on camera, because some kids have told me that they feel stressed by that, seeing their own face on camera, or having to take a class from home and having their siblings in the background. That may stress them to a level that once they start class, their brains might not be ready to just dive into content. Same thing for what may happen after class. If a kid is thinking, after this class, I am going to be dealing with something very stressful. The last 5 minutes of class, that's what they're thinking about. So if you as the educator is focused more on, okay, what did we learn today? You might not realize that the kid is no longer with you. So the more you look at them, who they are holistically, the better you are. And I think it's the same thing for adults. You may be a teacher, but just because you're a teacher at 8:25 in the morning doesn't mean that what happened to you last night or this morning, if somebody is sick in your family, those things don't just disappear. You are also a holistic human being. So the more you embrace that, the better. And we teach kids and teachers how to do that. And the last pillar is positive psychology, which, so I recently learned a term that I had never heard before. I learned the term uh, toxic positivity. And I couldn't dislike, I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, right? Because it's an oxymoron, like toxic positivity. I won't dive into that because I just don't like that term, that expression. But I'm going to explain to you what positive psychology is, which is what I've been telling people who use those words to me. I say, look, positive psychology doesn't mean that you ignore the things that are wrong or that aren't perfect. That's not what it means. It's just that we have realized that as human beings, especially as a field, psychology used to be one that focused on the things that were not working. So somebody would ask you, what's wrong? And you will list all the wrong things, and they would try to fix those things. And somebody just said, hey, why don't we try a different way? Why don't we ask what's working? What are the things that are right? And then we can maximize and uplift those things. That's all we're doing. The good and the bad already exists. We're just saying that we don't want you to focus only on the negative. And the more you learn about the brain, the more you realize that your brain is wired to focus on the negative more. So positive psychology um, is not saying that there's nothing bad going on. It's just saying focus on what you're doing well, right? And here's the way I want you to think about this. Do this with me. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. You're going to look around your room and count as many blue items as possible. Anything that's blue, you're going to count to me in 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, let's go. So look around, count all the blue items that you see. You got 7 more seconds. Everything blue, just count. Everything blue, count. I'm going to stop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, stop. All right, look here. Now go to the chat. Type your number. How many blue items did you find? 630. Whoa. 21, 28, 17, 18. Anybody got more than 30, 16, 19? I got 17, 20, 15, 10. So 14. Anybody else? So keep that in mind, right? And keep your eyes on me. Now, how many green items did you see? Again, keep your eyes here. How many green? Or how many red? 0. And the reason is it's not because there's no green around you. It's because I prime your brain to look for blue. The green is there, the red is there. But because I gave you a task, your brain is zeroed in on finding the blue and only saw mostly that. Now, that's exactly how positive psychology works. So if when you get up in the morning, right, typical morning, you get up at like, I don't know, 5 o'clock. Uh, First of all, the alarm, the sound you chose for your alarm already makes you upset. I don't know why, even though you chose it yourself, right? So you stop it, snooze, and then the second time, it's like, you get up, you're already mad, which is interesting because you chose to wake up at that time. And if the first thing you do is, for example, take your phone and go to social media, and it happens to be that the people who you follow the most or the sources you follow the most share negative news, your brain already starts. It's 5:20 in the morning, and your brain already starts to download bad news, negative news, breaking this, breaking that, everything is burning. You don't realize what you're doing, but you're priming your brain for negative. So when you get off your bed and you hit your shin by the bedside table, of course you're going to start cursing. And by the time you pour coffee on your skirt, on your pants, it's a wrap, right? So by that point, I can already predict that when you're driving and somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're not going to be happy at all when that happens. And I can tell you, when you get to work that day, I can tell you what kind of day you're going to have. Because what you have done effectively is the equivalent of what I did here by priming you to the blue, you prime yourself to the negative, and that colors your entire day. So what we teach through positive psychology is you can do the opposite of that, right? You can choose to carefully design your morning in a way where from when you get up to when you leave the house and get to work, you've done a few things that prime your brain for positive. And it's simple things, right? I shared, uh, uh, it's it's such a simple thing. The sound that wakes you up in the morning, I promise you, spend some time today. Think about a gentle sound or song that makes you happy in general and have that be your alarm instead of anything neutral or negative. Like try that, I promise you. It makes a huge difference. I wake up smiling every morning now just because when I hear that sound, I start smiling. So smiling is the second thing I was going to suggest. Try this. When you get up in the morning, first thing when you open your eyes, you sit in bed, just smile. Don't ask yourself if you have a reason to smile. Just smile. Just do it. For 10 seconds, your physiology is going to take care of your brain and your feelings. From then on, carefully choose what you do, what you eat, etc., and prime your brain to have more of a positive day. All right. I'm going to stop here and we're going to have our first breakout room check-in. So I just talked about neuroscience. I talked about mindful awareness, social emotional learning, and positive psychology. I want you guys to just talk about whatever came to your mind during this time I was talking, but focus on 3 steps. I'm gonna write those steps here. Think about insight. Think about no, that's misspelled. Insight, application, and action. So I wrote the insight, application, action. So talk about these things, whatever came to your mind, just go there for a few minutes. But think about any insight that you got from listening to this. How does it apply to your context? And then what action do you think you might take? Like you might say, hey, my action is I'm going to change my alarm, like the sound for my alarm tomorrow. So again, what's the insight? What's the application? And what action do you think you might take? Let me put you guys in breakout rooms. Stop sharing. All right, we're all back. So what are some things that you guys talked about in your small groups? And I would like this to happen both in the chat and also for some people to just unmute themselves and share. So what's something interesting, insightful, confusing, or whatever that you guys talked about with your small groups?
I'd be willing to chat or speak out. This was an insightful kind of aha moment when you were speaking about positive psychology. I've been trying to improve my own empathy for other people's and other people's perspectives. And so throughout COVID, there is so much negativity surrounding us and on the news and everything. And yes, it's easy to say don't watch the news, but I still need to know the weather each day and want to know what's going on in my neighborhood and my town. So I do watch it first thing in the morning. But one of the things that I get frustrated with is when folks make poor choices, adults make poor choices. And so then I try to empathize with what they're going through. And it really is that concept you said, positive psychology. I can't imagine everybody is so stressed out from COVID and feeling so negative. And it's like the domino effect of getting up and stubbing your toe and spilling your coffee. And all of these things happen one right after another. And then all of a sudden you're at a grocery store and you got frustrated and you threw the sugar and now you're on the news channel like somebody who blew their lid. And you're a perfectly sensible person usually. So I just, if we step into some folks' shoes who maybe don't have the mindfulness that others do or the awareness to stop and cope a little better, I think that concept of positive psychology is very important to help those who are not only students, but adults who are just bombarded by negativity.
And I just love that the way you wrote that, you say that, because it goes along with what Nicole said there, right? In the comment, working in education, it is easy to be swallowed whole by the negativity sometimes. I love the idea of priming your brain to look for the positive before I even walk out the door. Because your brain is going to find, like, do you really want to try to list all the negative things that are happening around you right now? You're not going to be done. I mean, I'm not going to follow you on that one. But our brains do that, and it's not always intentional, right? So the person who even used to be a little more kind of mindful or soft-spoken, something might have happened that triggered them during this pandemic that led to those behaviors, and that happens to kids and to adults. So the more aware we are of that, the more we can do something to change ourselves, but the more we can also be understanding of what's happening to others. I love that point. Let's see here again. What are the strengths you are using to survive the pandemic? Focus on those ideas and how we can apply them to our lesser strengths. Our group talked about different strategies, including exercise in the morning, taking breaths, and being grateful. Yes, I asked a simple question. I said, what's one thing you did well yesterday or today? It's a very simple question. What's one thing that you did well? But it is extremely powerful, because if you just say, how did it go? Or how was it? Isn't there a saying about the mind's tendency negative is like Velcro, the brain is positive? Okay, so if I knew, this is back to come clean. I don't know what that means, just because I'm not sure what like Velcro and Teflon. You're gonna have to explain that to me. I'm one of the, like, I have no idea what this means. Isn't there a saying about the mind's tendency? Negativity is like Velcro to the brain. Can somebody explain this to me? This sounds interesting.
I'm the one who typed that in, so I'm going to do my best to explain. So like Velcro is sticky, the Velcro stuff the sticky stuff that, so the the negativity tends to stick to our brain, the negative thoughts, the tendency. And then Teflon are those slippery pans, you know, where your eggs don't stick when you cook them. So
I
they slide
love
right
that.
off. So positivity just kind of tends to slide right out of our brains.
Yes, I think they say that for every 17 article that is published with negative or just shocking headline, there's like one positive. So meaning that if you were to flip your channels like randomly out of your 200 channels randomly, before you find anything uplifting, you're going to have to endure it's like just a lot of just like nonsense and craziness. So we have to be intentional about that. So I want to talk more about the brain because of that. Yeah, gratitude definitely makes a big, like have a gratitude practice first thing in the morning or before you go to bed. So I want to then talk about having actual lessons. So with those four pillars dictate the lessons that you actually have in the curriculum for MindUp, right? So the first lessons are about the brain. But before you do that, we just updated our curriculum. And I love the update because it now emphasizing on building community before you go into the brain. And every educator that I know, every strong teacher I know already knew this. Before you dive into any content, spend time with your kids, creating the kind of community culture that you want so that the kids can feel safe and they can take risk. And like, but now we made it intentional because one topic I'm particularly interested in, which I won't dive into too much today, is like equity. And SEL can be used to facilitate conversations about these topics. And yet we tend to shy away from those topics because like they're like too serious. They're not going anywhere. So we might as well use the tools we have with SEL to have those conversations, make the kids feel like, you know what, you're safe here. We can talk about anything. So the first few lessons are about the brain. Then the next lessons go into the mindfulness. Then you go into the positive psychology. And the last lesson there is taking mindful action into the community. Because it's always been important for us to teach kids and adults that the whole point of learning these tools is so that you can improve your life and then you can share that with other people. Because if you just get better at understanding your feelings, your emotions, your self-regulation, etc., but you don't share it, like what's the point? It's only like the punchline is like, I got it. Now I'm going to share it. So that's why we have an intentional lesson there on taking mindful action in the community. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about the brain because this is the key. This is the foundation of everything that we teach. So when we teach the brain to kids and to teachers, we simplify it, right, to these three parts of the brain. So your brain has like billions of neurons. So I'm not talking like hardcore neuroscience here, but we narrow it down to the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the hippocampus. So your amygdala is the oldest part of your brain. It's in charge of your emotions, your feelings, and it's connected to your defense mechanism. And it's the part of your brain that is famous for reacting, not responding. It's famous for the three F's that you've all heard before: fight, flight, freeze. So this part of your brain, anytime it has any interaction with the outside world, just assumes that there's danger coming in response to fight, flight, freeze. Which is why if I had something, even something soft like this, and I was in front of you, and without warning you, I threw it at you, three things that might happen. One, you're gonna like without thinking, just like do something like this, which is a classic fight. Two, you might try to duck, which you flight. Three, you might just kind of stare at it as it gets closer and closer and closer and closer until it establishes contact, which is classic freeze. Like no matter what, that's gonna happen. And it's the same reason why if there's a mosquito that lands on your forearm, nobody here thinks, oh, I wonder if it's a friendly mosquito. What you do is like bap, right? And just whack it, respond, fight, flight, freeze. Now this is useful for evolution because as our ancestors evolved, it's important for them to not necessarily overthink potential dangers. Looks like danger, I'm gonna fight it. Looks like danger, I'm running away. Looks like danger, I'm gonna hide and not move until he goes away. Because our ancestors were all curious and inquisitive who, when they heard noise somewhere, were like, oh, I wonder what that is. They wanted to check behind the bushes. Guess what happened to them? They got eaten. So the good news for you, my friends, is that you are the descendants of the most neurotic human beings that have ever walked on this planet. Your ancestors were the ones who were like, no matter what they heard, like, no, danger, I'm running away. And that's good. But the problem is that your amygdala is a part of the brain with a negativity bias, therefore, right? It just perceives that, bam, danger. And unfortunately, your amygdala can't differentiate between a perceived danger and a real danger. That means that something like, they took a survey around the country asking people, what's the scariest thing in the world for you? And they say public speaking. Like, I have a lot to say about that, but I won't dive into it. Public speaking, like before death or anything. So that means that when somebody is trying to give a speech and all of a sudden they can't move, they forget everything they planned, their brain is having an amygdala moment that makes the brain feel like it is the same as if somebody was trying to kill them. And I use that word intentionally because when you're an educator and you have a student in your class and you ask them, okay, it's test day, it's your time to do the presentation, and they get up and they can't say a word, and you're trying to like reason with them, trying to like remind, or you punish them. It's like, what are you doing? That what's happening to that kid right now is that their poor little brain is gathering the resources to try to understand what this danger is. This is a real danger to that brain. I'm sure you've all seen a student who you put on the spot for something and he starts being rude to you or mean to other people. That's a classic fight response. It's your turn to read. Why me? Why are you always picking me? Why don't you pick her or him? Why can't a teacher? Oh, you're a terrible teacher. I can't stand you. Mom, I hate you. That's a classic fight. That's not because the kid actually hates you. And I love kids because most kids actually come back and apologize. Like, I didn't mean that. Adults, on the other hand, hey, let's move on. So when you see those reactions, or a kid who the second is time to time to start the test, like, I gotta go to the bathroom. That's flight. So I'm giving these examples so you can understand that more likely than not, any quote unquote misbehavior that any kid has ever exhibited in class, more likely than not, it has this direct connection to their defense mechanism and nothing to do with you personally and nothing to do with with them being a bad kid. Once you learn that, you realize that, maybe the way I respond to this can make things worse, because if a kid is having an amygdala reaction and you get in their face and you start yelling at them, what do you think happens to the amygdala? You think it calms down? Of course not. Things get worse. And then you think about the second part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. This is the decision-making part of the brain. This is where your higher order thinking happens. This is where you have your moral compass, your impulse control, all that good stuff you want students to access every day in class, in school. It's in the prefrontal cortex, almost everything. And yet, we now know that when your amygdala takes over your brain, the prefrontal cortex slowly but surely shuts down and it stops working. So the part of the brain that would do the thinking doesn't work when the emotional part takes over. And if this doesn't sound familiar to you, it will after this. Think about the last time you were driving in your car, you were already late to where you were going, got stuck in traffic, and then you finally got the green light. And then as you were going, somebody came and aggressively cut you off. How did you react? How many of you guys were like, oh, it's okay, man, go ahead. I'm sure you have an emergency. Uh, Probably not a lot. I've seen people who actually like follow the person. It's like, why are you following somebody? You were already late to where you were going. So if 5 minutes later you ask yourself, but what was I thinking? The truth is you weren't really thinking, because the thinking part of your brain was slowly shut down because your amygdala perceived that danger. Now, a kid then who is a good kid who's learned and who should be prepared to answer a question or take a test, and they're having an amygdala moment. Uh, Hold on, guys. Uh, Hold on. Give me a second. This is the life of Zoom. I have somebody. Give me a sec. Da, 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 da. Yeah, give me a second. So let me finish this. So when you try to reason with that kid, um, it's impossible because the reasoning part of the brain isn't working. It's not working. And so you trying to explain to them, well, why are you doing this? Why do you do that? It's a waste of your time at the moment. And the last part of the brain is the hippocampus. It's in charge of your long-term memories. And this is where the more you do something, the more it is stored in your hippocampus, and you can access those memories. So think about it this way: when things come from outside, they hit the amygdala first. Then the PFC has to decide, this is a real threat. What do we do about this? And then the more you practice it, the more it goes into your memories, and then you can easily access those. And if you know this as an educator, then it completely transforms the way you perceive potential misbehaviors from kids. Again, one, negativity bias. Two, doesn't distinguish between a real and a perceived danger. And three, the thinking part of the brain shuts down. Okay, I'm going to stop here and give you a few minutes again. But I want you to think about, how can you use this knowledge if you were to change something tomorrow? What would you change using this knowledge? We're going to spend only 2 or 3 minutes on this, and then we're going to come back. So I'm going to put you guys in rooms again. Breakout rooms. I'm not going to lie to you guys. That's what teachers have to do right now. So
I have something that I do, and it's just, I have this little mantra, and I say, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. When someone aggravates me with something that they say, and it reminds me that it's about what's going on with them, and then I can be more forgiving and compassionate.
that sounds simple, but it's so powerful. So powerful. And I'm seeing here in the chat, more likely than not, any type of behavior in class is not really, is really, yeah, it's not because you did anything to them. No, it has nothing to do with you most of the time. It's not the anger. Come on, I had a kid who once told me, after I told this to them, they were like, "Oh, so you mean I'm not bad, Mr. Balla? What do you mean?" I'm like, "What do you mean you're not bad?" It's like, "I'm not bad." I'm like, "But what are you talking about?" Comes to find out, so many adults around this kid had told him that he's a bad kid because of misbehavior, that he believed that he is bad. I'm like, "No, you're not bad. That's your amygdala, son. Like, we got this. Now that you know this, you could change something about it." So that knowledge is powerful. Spoke about looking at behavior of others with soft eyes. Oh, I like that. Soft eyes. I never heard. I like that a lot. Haven't had too many kids flip it.
Hi, someone in our group, Barbara, she mentioned having soft eyes. And I think most of us in the group were, just that terminology, having soft eyes on the student as well as ourselves. And like, it touched us, just having soft eyes. So thank you, Barbara, from that. We thought that was pretty mindful and really be present and just, be kind, right? And be, walk the talk.
I love that. I hadn't heard that before either, but that sounds perfect. We're just hearing soft eyes. I get it right away. So what I want to do with you guys right now is take a brain break through mindful breathing through Zoom. So this is what we're going to do for about 2 minutes. If you're sitting, see if you can sit with your feet flat on the ground. And if you can't have your feet flat on the ground, it's okay. If you can't, just do it. And if you can have your back straight, have your back straight. And what we're going to do, this I need to time. I want to time this for like about 2 minutes. We're going to do some mindful breathing. The breathing needs to be belly breathing, right? And I want to explain why. Chest breathing, shallow, super shallow. In fact, this is like stress breathing. When somebody's stressed, like, you know what he did to, no. Belly breathing. Fill your belly when you inhale. Then long exhale. And exhale either through your nose or through your mouth. It's up to you, whatever makes you comfortable, right? And as we start, I'm gonna have you guys close your eyes if you're comfortable, and those who are not comfortable, it's okay. So let's go. If you're comfortable, close your eyes. If not, that's fine. Just look at maybe your hands. Take your first deep inhale through your nose, belly breathing, exhale. Do it again, and focus on the sound of the chime. Here we go. Continue to focus on breathing in and out at your own pace. But see if you can exhale for twice as long as you inhale. So if you inhale for 2 seconds, try to exhale for 4 seconds. And as you're doing that, you may notice that your mind is wandering or there are distractions. If that's the case, give 1 second of attention to said distraction, and then just bring your focus back to breathing. With the next few deep breaths, when you exhale, check in with your back and your shoulders. So if there's any tension in your shoulders or your back, when you exhale, exhale that tension and release it. Next, do the same thing with your neck. Release any tension there when you exhale. Same thing with your jaw. Same thing with your eyebrows. Make sure you're not frowning. Just relax everything as you exhale. You're going to hear the chime one more time. Listen to it for as long as you can. And when you can't anymore, then you will look up or open your eyes. Thank you for being mindful. That was just 2 minutes. And we have about 2 minutes to go, which is perfect because this is the practice that we encourage that you use for yourself and for your students multiple times a day to go from that state to that trait, right? You start to rewire the brain. The more you do this, the more your brain is actually less triggered by the things that stress you out. 2 to 3 minutes is what we recommend, but even if it starts with 30 seconds or a minute, that's perfectly fine. So as we close out, I would love for you to just type or tell me in a couple words, how did that feel for you? Grounding, centering, grounding. Wonderful. Yeah. So imagine doing this with students every day. Imagine doing this at home every day in just 2 minutes. So I'm glad it helped, even though it was through Zoom. So here we go. Right on time. You even got 1 more minute.
Thank you so much, Dido.
Welcome, Tracy.
That was
Thank you,
wonderful
Dido.
timing. Yay. Thanks for everybody for joining in with us.